Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another of our Managing Your Small Business Beyond the Pandemic webinar, number 101 in a series that began on March the 18th, just almost 3 weeks away. We began back in March of 2020 and been here every Wednesday since and still talking about more pandemic relief programs. There's even more out there, if you can believe that, that could be on the horizon that we will talk about and hopefully be pivoting to better things soon. But there is some interesting information that has been coming out of Washington, D.C., mainly the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee and some other things that we're going to discuss today. And we're going to talk about some of the other programs that have been rolling around, such as our Kern Micro Grant. So again, a very pleasant good afternoon. I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm the director of the CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center in downtown Bakersfield. So what's new today? Today, February the 16th, 2022. So it looks like we very well could be on the verge of actually having some more restaurant stimulus. So there's been a lot going on that has been going on behind the scenes, just to set this up a little bit. But yeah, it's really been going on since last August the 7th. And as of August the 7th, there was an effort to try to go back and to assist more restaurant businesses that were not able to get the funding. And we'll get into a lot of those specifics in a few moments. So with that, there could also be other types and other industries beyond the food beverage businesses that could actually be wrapped into this. It is rather interesting. We are getting sound bites, and that's pretty much it. A lot of it is details later. We're getting a lot from the chairman of the Senate Small Business Committee, the Honorable Ben Cardin from Maryland. And so a lot of it's coming from him right now, but the details are being held rather closely to the vest. But other industries might benefit from this as well. It's similar type of industries that have been impacted by in-person visits. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, there's a movement to bring back the the employee retention credit. Now, 101 webinars, and I wonder how many times I have started that with the word earned. Obviously, I get caught up in the earned income credit, which is a similar IRS product, but the employee retention credit is one that's also handled by the IRS, and it's been around since the quarter number 4 of 2020. So basically got 4 quarters out of it. The fourth quarter for 2021, it went away, and there's an effort to bring that back. So we've actually now had a good solid week under us and little experiences, most good, very favorable. A couple of them have been some changes we're going to report to on the current micro grant program. And recall that micro grant program is for those that is for $2,500 and less for our smallest and vulnerable and needy businesses that really kind of have been left out in a lot of the programs that have come along, such as the employee retention credit. Many of them didn't apply or actually could take advantage of that particular pandemic relief. But we'll have an update on the current micro grant that comes through the state of California. So we'll look at the other pandemic relief programs. We're not going to really look. I've decided change of mind, last minute change, executive decision. We'll talk briefly about the Mono County program that we discussed and rolled out a few weeks ago with Jeff Simpson, the Economic Development Manager in Mono County. We'll have a little bit of news today, your questions and a poll. So let's go to the poll right now, the first poll question. First poll question is going to kind of, we're not burying the lead today. We're going to go right after the lead with, did you apply for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund? Now that came out last May of 2021, and we're looking for, starting off with no, you did not apply. Yes, I got funding, I got it, and yes, I did not. So 3 choices, launch the poll for you. Did you apply for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund? No, yes, I got it. Yes, I didn't get it, but I applied. So getting many of you that jumped in and seeing that about 53% of you have participated at this point. Give you a few more moments in order to jump in. The question for today, the first poll question is, did you apply for the RRF, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund? And knowing that it was kind of an obscure program, we thought we'd throw it out there, hopefully find somebody who was successful at this, and we didn't succeed. So we're going to end the poll. I guess if you got the money, there's no reason to come back and wonder what's going on with the new money. So here we are ending the poll at this time with about 67% of you participating, and 89% said no, you did not apply, not a restaurant business or not impacted. 11% of you did apply and did not receive it. And then actually nobody here today got the funds, and why would you? You got the funds. Okay, poll question number 2 is going to be a little bit different. You know, we kind of like to go a little more of a news type question, a little whimsical today. And this is based on public reports. And public reports is that here in the West, and specifically here in the southern San Joaquin Valley, and actually throughout the San Joaquin Valley and other parts of California and parts of the West, we're experiencing the worst drought, one of the worst droughts in a long time. So how long has that been? So we're looking at, according to published reports, this drought has not been as bad as any previous droughts going back to, let's see, the 900s. Yes, that would be the 1000th century. The 1500s or the 16th century, or 1928. So again, we're looking at unprecedented drought, really the worst drought that that any of us have seen. Let's put it that way. And so where are we going back to? And I don't know how you substantiate going back to the 900s or the 850s or wherever potentially that could have been from, or the 1500s. I don't know anybody that could actually give me verification from that was around then. So let's close the poll. And the correct answer for this is I will accept either the 900th AD or the 1500s. That is correct. Ever since this century, in the last 22 years, you have to go back now 900 years, if according to the Wall Street Journal and their published report, or back to the 850s or 900s, according to the New York Times. Pretty perilous stuff we're going through at this time. So, you know, and there they are right there. 65% of you, 1928. I tricked you, I'm sorry. But going all the way back to the 900s and the 1500s, 12% of you got the 900s, 24% 1500s. That's a long time ago. That's really kind of showing how bad things are around here. And if that isn't enough for you, why not have a, Jeopardy can have a video or, some type of poll that's different from the regular polling that we use. So we're going to do that today. We're going to actually give you another shot at the audio poll, video poll, and that is going to be right there. There's some drought in the West right there. Now, the drought in the West, if you would please, whoever wants to answer and take a guess at what body of water that is in the West, does appear to be from the topography somewhere in the Southwest. So that is really a drought. I'll give you a hint. It was the last reservoir, last body of water my father water skied on. That'll really help you. So if you want to just go to the chat, Maureen will let you know who wins that. But there is a picture of the drought in the West on how bad it is getting. So are there opportunities that as small business people we look at? It's kind of hard for us to produce water other than through rain, but are there opportunities that might be coming along and might be able to help us alleviate that? Where there's disruption, there's business opportunity. Okay, let's jump in and look at the status action for key pandemic relief programs that are still open. The employee retention credit that we'll talk about potentially coming back just in a little bit, coming back in a little bit. What we'll see that there's still, 4 quarters that are open. Fourth quarter of 2020, the deadline is coming up on these, but 2021, actually quarter 1, 2, and 3, if you can qualify, and we do have quarter 4 maybe coming back. We have the City of Bakersfield Restart Loan to Business Program. So this particular program is being administered by Access Plus Capital, our friends. You can contact Buffy Norby at the Bakersfield office, or you can contact the Kern Women's Business Center. Also, the Kern County Micro Grant Program is open. We'll have more on that. And it opened last week. We started to pick up applications, started to receive applications. We'll give you an update on that program, on some of the things we have learned. Recall that the Kern County Micro Grant Program is administered by the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. So it is a program out of the organization we call GoBiz, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Some very prudent county leaders took the initiative in order to bring these funds, about $1.2 million, to Kern County. We're working with a lot of the guidelines as they come down from the state, and the funding isn't here, but we started accepting applications. We'll give you an update status and timelines and other things that are going on with the Kern County Micro Grant Program. The Mono County Grant and Forgivable Loan Program is no question mark there. It is now open. It is open. And it is a kind of an intensive, laborious process for going through that grant process. And it is being done by a consultant to Mono County. It is a kind of like the City of Bakersfield program. I believe it is a community development block grant program, and CDBG funding requires that the money go to low to moderate income individuals. So tracking and actually verifying all that information leads for a lengthy process. Now, that being said, that there is plenty of money in the program and the money is there. It does take a little bit of effort to get, but there is an excellent opportunity for actually accessing one of the 2 programs, the grant or the forgivable loan program. The California Dream Fund is going to be opening next month. We'll briefly talk a little bit about that. Probably even later than that will be the Small Business Venture Fund, as we're calling it. It'll be interesting to see exactly what that is going to be. A lot of the EIDL stuff, EIDL loan is actually closed, but you can still get an increase or reconsideration. It's going to be interesting. I might mention this more than once today, but I want to make sure I get it in, is that the programs that we're talking about today about doing more in the food and beverage sector and also in other industries, those funds are going to come from alternative sources that have not been named yet. So it's going to come from pandemic programs that have already been funded, and there is a surplus. And they're talking, I believe, somewhere around the number being thrown is $45, $48 billion. No new money, no new taxes in order to get a bipartisan effort. Now, some of that money could come from the EIDL loan program. So we're really encouraging individuals, if you do want to seek an increase, if you have reconsideration from the COVID-19 EIDL that did actually close to new applications on December 31st, 2021, please get that in now, because we don't know exactly where that's going based on these other programs we're going to talk about today. So the EIDL Targeted Advance Program is now closed. Reconsideration was open until last night at midnight. So we'll be flipping around that sign to reconsideration is now closed. Shut off the lights, go home. If you have the targeted advance, the reconsideration is now over, as it is with the supplemental advance. That was a component of the targeted advance. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Kern County Small Business Micro Grant Program. Recall that on this program, the intent is to provide relief for the smallest, neediest, and most vulnerable micro enterprise businesses. So that is generally the case of this program where they had not benefited from previous pandemic relief programs. So again, the intent, and I always like to, as we have with all these programs, even when we were grappling and fighting PPP through all the changes and interim rules and interim final rules and new changes and regulations, it always comes back to the intent. And so the intent here is to provide the relief for the smallest, neediest, and most vulnerable micro enterprise businesses. Now, you can have received other pandemic programs. You could have received maybe, an EIDL, a targeted EIDL, or one similar type program, or even a PPP. However, the one program you cannot have received and apply for this program, because it's basically a sister program, is the COVID EIDL California Relief Grant Program. And you'll recall when we were talking about that for what seemed to be the longest period of time, it was administered by Lindustry.com. Now, Lindustry had other programs that they administered. We had clients out there, particularly during the PPP2 phase, when it started going out to our smaller businesses that were able to access up to $20,000, $20,833 to be exact, if they had $100,000 in sales, and that just changed in the last couple months of the program that was open. But Lindustry did do work on the PPP or PPP2 as well, and they might have had other programs. But if you received money from the COVID-19 California Relief Grant Program that went through many different iterations and different cycles, and I believe the last round was like round 9. And still, they are still actually funding some of these that have been, and the program has been closed to new applications for many months. So they're still going through the end of that particular funding cycle. Still encourage people to look at there. If you didn't receive it and you actually applied, to keep checking your email, because a lot of times they go to an email box that is not being monitored, or it's been closed, or is in the clutter or junk phase. So a little bit about the program is it started taking applications on February 7th, last Monday. We have become taking applications. If you've applied through us, be patient. We've got plenty of time, because the state funds might not even arrive till as late as March 24th. We're anticipating and we're hoping that the funds get here before that. But right now, the funds could be as late as March 24th. Ideally, I would think that it's going to happen sometime earlier in March, maybe around the 10th at the latest. But right now, we're still 3 weeks away from even having funds available to actually distribute. Excuse me. So what we'll see is we will continue to analyze this. If you've submitted an application to the SBDC, I can tell you, you will probably be hearing from somebody from our office. That person will likely be myself. And it'll be probably, once webinar Wednesday is over, it'll probably be looking at maybe Thursday and Friday. So be patient. We'll be in touch with you. We will get you in line if you're eligible to receive these funds for that targeted group. So also the outreach to vital rural areas is something that we will take the main effort on. We are kind of targeting ourselves, each of the 4 groups that are administering this, the SBDC, CAPK, the Community Action Partnership of Kern, the Kern Economic Development Foundation, and the Kern WBC are actually all responsible for providing outreach to a rural area. And we will be in the Kern River Valley and also the Indian Wells Valley, the Ridgecrest community, letting people know about that this program exists, and to try to get out to those smallest and neediest businesses, your landscapers, and also potentially, in-home healthcare and in-home daycare and babysitters and things like that really don't oftentimes have the access to a fine educational program such as this. Our agencies also recommend, that our agencies, the 4 of us, we're recommended to follow the eligibility that follows state mandated guidelines. So a lot of the information and the questions we're going to ask on this program are being mandated and coming down from the state of California. And again, it is with that intent to get this to the smallest, neediest, and most vulnerable businesses that haven't been able to access relief during this particular time. So then what happens is the process then goes to the county, which approves the final application and initiates the payment. So appreciate your patience in this. Again, it's just not a real fast process. Kern County was one of the first, if not the first county to receive this funding from the state. So a lot of the bugs are being worked out between the actually get this funding out. And again, it is our sincere intent to get this to our smallest and neediest businesses. So some of the key provisions, if you've been on here, we've talked about it for a few weeks now. The grant can go up to $2,500 per business. It does not need to be paid back. You must have been in business though in 2019. So you need to have been in business from anytime before December 31st, 2019. One of the provisions that we started announcing last week when it became better known to us was that it must be your main source of income for the individual. So if you're gainfully employed and you say, I'm not doing anything on the weekends, I'm going to drive for Uber and pay off, my Tesla while I meet new people. That unfortunately will not be, you cannot apply because your main source of business would be your employment income. So that's something that we're kind of working through right now and trying to make sure that for the integrity of the program that we hold that true. Certain nonprofits are eligible. I believe yours truly has kind of misread one of the questions, one of the eligibility questions. And if you've called our office, if you're a nonprofit or if you know a nonprofit, a small nonprofit, that was around in 12/31/2019. It's very important that the nonprofit actually has revenue as well. One thing that is kind of a problem is if that nonprofit does not have revenue, it really kind of makes it more problematic to try to get approval. But small nonprofits that did not receive the California Relief Grant through Lindustry, there was a cultural museum and other nonprofits were eligible to apply for it. So if you are one of those nonprofits that did not receive that funding and they're small, my apologies. I misled you at least early in this, very, very early in this process. But we will gladly assist you with moving forward if you're a 501c3, 6, or 18, I believe. And of course, the business must have fewer than 5 full-time equivalents. I think that this is in here because, if you're doing less than $50,000 a year, and that's one of the other ones, which I believe is on the next slide, or actually it isn't, it actually got removed. But the other key provision is going to be that you had to do less than $50,000 in 2019. So if you have less than 5 full-time equivalents, I believe that rule is in there, at least from my interpretation of that, is because you could have been a very small business in 2019 and actually prospered during the pandemic. We've seen businesses do that. They're kind of far and few in between, but they are out there. And so if your business grew rapidly from being less than 50,000 in gross receipts in 2019, then that also will present eligibility issues if you have more than 5 employees. So again, being one of the partners on this particular process, along with the other 3 member agencies we talked about, our process here at the SBDC is to assist, package, and gain approval for eligible applicants, our smallest micro businesses. So what we are offering is that we're offering application assistance, we're offering supporting documentation to support you with that documentation. Really, what I really think that what stands out with us, with our entity, is the fact that we do have the free one-on-one consulting, and we really encourage smaller businesses to look at the bigger picture. The last several weeks, we've talked about working with groups such as Access Plus Capital on their Nano Grant program, which could access maybe up to $10,000. But there are other things. If you're needing other assistance, either from marketing or social media marketing, if you're looking at financial assistance, I remember telling the program, I want to try to figure out how I can earn more money. Those are the things that we can help you with as well. And really is what one of the reasons we're here. So what we need is a completed application. We are going to be requesting a 1040 form for 2019. And since you're self-employed, you will likely have a Schedule C, just the front page of both of those. So basically just 2 pages of your tax return from 2019, or if you're a nonprofit, we're going to require some type of nonprofit return. So we'll follow up with a call. We encourage everybody that's going through the process to call us at 661-654-2856. Operators are standing by that can help you with the process and then forward you the application. We did last week, we will probably be following up with our email at the end of this week with the application attached to that. So please, we think we're really excited about this program. We're here to assist 93 small businesses throughout the county. And as we work out the bugs on this very new program, again, Kern County is one of the very first in the state out of 58 counties to have applied and received these funds. So we're kind of the guinea pigs with the state. And as we go, we're going to see eligibility issues. I think we have them all fixed now, but nonprofits, C3s, 6s, and 18s can apply. And also, as we started mentioning in the last week or two, it really needs to be your main source of revenue or income in order to be eligible for this program. If you don't have a tax return for that year, for 2019, I'll gladly give you a call tax return from 2019. So again, we're just looking at 2 pages off of that 2 pieces of paper. Who knows how big your tax return is? Maybe it's 3 pages, maybe it's 300 pages. We just want 2 of them. So we have new pandemic relief funding that appears to be likely. So let's take you through what has happened and what's been going on. And back, as I mentioned, on August the 7th, 2021, bipartisan support started when Senator Ben Cardin, who's the chair of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, Roger Wicker, who's a member of the opposite party from Mississippi, co-authored a bill in order to actually bring more money to the restaurant revitalization program. We'll get in with what the restaurant revitalization program did, but essentially it provided $28.6 billion aggregate to restaurants and other food businesses and beverage businesses across the country. So Mr. Cardin last week said that they had a tentative agreement and they should be able to get the 60 votes in the Senate. They're looking for a legislative vehicle to move it on. So what they will do is likely attach to the 2022 omnibus bill, which is the spending bill that will be taken up in both houses of Congress in March, early March probably of 2022. So that's a little bit about what's been going on. It's been a lot of behind grips. We've seen that bipartisan support where members from both sides of the aisle can agree to help small businesses and help them survive the pandemic. So again, they think they have the 60 votes and they think that they have a way to get it through Congress. So that's a little bit about that. So the funding details have not been released. All I have is some transcripts from the chair and what he has said about it. But what we do know is quite a bit about the program, enough to talk about it today. So those funding details have not been released, but the total bill will probably be no larger than $48 billion. Of that, the bulk of that would go to restaurants that were not funded during the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. I don't know if I've mentioned this later, but one thing that I have read also is that it appears that there will not be another process in order to actually apply, that they will go off of the large amount of restaurants who were not funded from the initial the initial restaurant revitalization fund from May of 2021. So they're also trying to get other similar industries, and by other similar industries, I picked that up to be in gyms, hotel, minor league sports, and potentially other businesses that either were forced to shut down and stay shut down for a considerable long period of time, Breeders' Grants, or businesses that had too few employees or could not actually utilize the PPP. So they couldn't utilize either the PPP because they were closed, or they had too few employees in order to actually use the PPP effectively. So most of that is going to go to the RRV. Why do I call this the RRV? Totally dyslexic. So RRF fund, and we move along. So again, the main objective of this package, and again, we're always looking at the intent on these things, is to replenish the RRF that Congress enacted last year. The program drew 278,000 applicants, but only a third of those received some of that initial funding. So out of that third, there were probably a little over 90,000 that were funded, still leaving, a significant amount of businesses somewhere around the 170,000 mark, 180,000. So the purpose is that those that were in line, that qualified and would have gotten it for any other reason of the fact that they ran out of money, will get their funds. And if you recall with this program, there were some set-asides for your smaller and needier businesses. And those were challenged in court, and they were upheld. And that kind of created a huge amount of upheaval in this program, because you had literally 3,000 people who had already been notified. They'd been notified that they were going to receive this grant. And then what happened was that they were notified that they could not fulfill it because they ran out of money after they had to go back and start using the mandated method for actually declaring the winners of this grant. And those were the ones that were purely on a first come, first served basis. So your timestamp of this loan of when it came in, I believe the program initiated, if I recall, on, I believe, May 3rd, and it went from there. So we saw when they hit $93,000 and the money was gone, that changed everything. So the intent again is to replenish it and then actually start getting the people who were notified that they could not, that they were going to receive it, but then the courts pushed them back in lines that they'll get their funds, and then start going through the process of actually funding other restaurants, bars, and food businesses. So a little downside on this is that Cardin acknowledged that the package won't provide as much money as he or others wanted, but he was clear that in order to get it through a bipartisan Senate, that he needed to do what he needed to do. And essentially that was to use funds that were appropriated for other purposes. So repurposing these funds now are coming back. And so where are those funds coming from? Well, some of them could come from the EIDL program, could come from maybe some PPP funds that actually a small amount that might not have been funded, but the PPP did run out of funds in May of 2021 as well. So really, it's kind of going to be interesting to see when all the final stuff comes out to where these funds are coming from. Maybe they're coming from other non-business programs, but there is still, last report, plenty of money in EIDL. So EIDL's got to be shouldering some of the funds. And remember, we're talking about the employee retention credit in a few minutes, also potentially coming back. And it was some of the EIDL funds and some of the employee retention funds that were actually taken away, the ERC for the fourth quarter, and actually moved toward the bipartisan infrastructure bill. the $1 trillion infrastructure package that was passed. That's sometime in the fall of 2021. So that's kind of a little bit about where that's all coming from. A little bit about the past, just so you recall what the Restaurant Revitalization Fund was. These are some of the program notes that we had from our webinars back in maybe March or April leading up to that release. So again, there was 28.6 billion that went very, very fast. A lot of reasons why people could have actually, it was really a much easier process. We talked a bit about the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, and we were successful in finding homes for some of our businesses for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, but it was far more restrictive and far more actually onerous as far as the application process than the RRF that took about 20 minutes for a lot of people. I did hear reports that people did jump in and had problems getting in initially and experienced some problems, but for the bulk of individuals that applied in this particular program, it went relatively smooth. So there were the set-asides that I think now are gone because of the court ruling. That was going to benefit, again, the smaller businesses that first and foremost that had 50,000 less in sales, but also those that had less than 500. Those have all been removed as part of that court case that actually ended those and kind of threw chaos into the whole RRF program. So, here's just some more numbers. We already talked about the 287,000 and some things, which it's kind of interesting though. This is the first 2 days, and a program that ended up with 277,000. The first 2 days of the RRF attracted 186,200 applications. So I hope that's not indicative of needed to be there the first couple of days in order to get in, but we will see once we move along from this. Again, also, I don't know about the eligibility. They received a lot of applications that were not eligible from a variety of different reasons. The biggest eligibility issue that we were seeing back then were that you had to subtract the restaurant revitalization funding. You had to subtract from that amount that you were actually awarded any PPP or PPP2 that you received. So any of the PPP in 2020, any of it in 2021 needed to be reduced from that amount. And so that's where some of that eligibility, and hopefully, everybody who didn't get it that's on today will get a fair shot at getting that again. So that is pretty much a little bit of the past of that program. Also in the news this last week, was an effort to bring back, as we had mentioned, the Employee Retention Credit, the ERC. And just a little bit of background on that. It was established under the CARES Act, the very first, very, very, very first stimulus package, very broad, very needed, changed a lot of things, changed EIDL and a lot of other programs very early in the game. So the ERC actually started with the CARES Act, but then it was actually going to only run until 2021. So on December 31st, it was to expire. Then actually, with the passage of the Economic Aid Act on December 27th, it was extended for 6 months. So that brought into Q1 and Q2 of 2021. And then the American Rescue Plan on March 11th further brought in Q3 and 4, of which the infrastructure bill, as we said, actually changed that. ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, also added special rules that applied to severely financial distressed employer, which actually made it a little bit easier for some people to qualify. And also, for the first time, we had some business that could actually apply for a federal pandemic relief program that was not in business when the pandemic started on or about February 28th of 2020. So a recovery startup is what they call a business that actually started during the pandemic. And actually, for the first time, they could apply for Q3 and 4 of this program. of which now, as we stand today, it was only Q3. So when it actually, again, the infrastructure bill was repealed the last quarter to generate 8.2 billion in revenue. And as you know, we've seen with some of the bipartisan other bills like the infrastructure, or slightly bipartisan at least, a lot of the revenue kind of came from programs that really, at least Congress felt didn't need it, and that was one of them with the ERC. So that 8.2 billion in revenue was, I think, what they were expecting to pay out for this particular program. So again, it was created, for those hard-hit businesses. You had to be impacted by COVID, and offered up to $28,000 per employee. So that's a little bit about the ERC. Let's move on to EIDL, and we'll keep more of those with you. It was interesting. I did sit in, and before we gave the EIDL update, let me just give you another quick things that what happened in yesterday's Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee meeting that I was invited to. I basically crashed the party, but they had 4 bipartisan bills that they actually approved, and they were for these reasons. And these are things we'll keep an eye on as we move down the road to see how they can benefit our small businesses here in Kern, and Mono County and throughout the Central California region. So we'll look at Senate Bill 1617, which was for disaster assistance for rural communities, which made it easier for rural communities to actually obtain disaster status when a disaster struck. So that is one item. Also, going back to 1979, I know many of us weren't around then. I guess I was oblong then. But in 1979, there was an interagency committee on women's business enterprise. And so this is being brought up again with Senate Bill 2042. This is going to be a committee to try to assist and try to provide more support for women business enterprises. So this has actually got out of committee too, Senate Bill 2042, Senate Bill 2521, which is the Small Business Investment Company, another program of the SBA. We don't talk about it very much, or if any. The SBICs are kind of venture capital programs. That is an SBA program where they get certain government benefits for investing in businesses. And so the SBIC basically is creating an SBIC working group. Last year, SBICs actually had 1,063 investments last year, of which it was determined that only 5% went to underserved members of our community. Underserved, we are typically talking about minority businesses, Black, Brown, Asian, veteran businesses, women businesses, rural, low wealth, etc. Only 5%. So obviously Congress is not very happy with that 5%. So very few, and even some states didn't have any. It seemed like a lot of the bills were focused in Silicon Valley or the Los Angeles markets. And lastly, Senate Bill 3451 is the SBA Cyber Awareness Act, and it passed as well to try to create and try to help out with a huge problem we have, and we're going to be addressing real soon, and that is the cyber awareness and cybersecurity issues that we have. So moving right along to EIDL, our EIDL update. We do know that EIDL, targeted EIDL, we mentioned a little bit about this during the warm-up and during the update on all of the particular programs. So, the key thing to remember is, and it ties to that rural disaster, is that SBA is still processing non-COVID EIDL. So there are other disasters in California, such as fires, droughts, and floods that have occurred and have damaged communities. And there are still ways of getting the economic injury disaster loan, and also if you've suffered any exact property damage. And I know we've had some of those in our 3 counties with fires and with drought declarations. So those are still happening and still out there that are still moving along. Yesterday was the last day for the reconsideration for targeted EIDL. Again, there's that word plenty of funds, which tells me that if they have plenty of funds, they're going to take some of that and put toward the restaurant deals, but that's just my opinion. Obviously, nobody calls me and tells me. So reconsideration, you can still do a reconsideration. I would do it extremely quickly if I were you. Email SBA at PDCERCONS, which is PDC Recons, short for reconsiderations at SBA.gov. Really, what's really important in this is to try to find out why your idle was declined. And if you have a reason, and if say you have a reason that says that you can't substantiate the actual idle, the idle loss, essentially, I think what they're looking at is a couple of different things. They're looking at your pre and post idle numbers. So really looking at the fact that you had strong growth or you had a significant impact from idle. That could be one. Another could be tax returns weren't actually able to be obtained. But I'd really look at that revenue and really have it suggest and look at some of your numbers is where I think that we really need to kind of look to try to find out why an idle was potentially declined. So if you do to get that, then what you have 6 months to actually change that decision. And it's really important to look at that and try to provide information to SBA on why they should change their minds. Obviously, they come up with a determination if they say, for example, they can't substantiate that you have suffered a loss, then you need to be able to address that in many ways in a correspondence to them and actually let them know where you think you've sustained that particular loss. And always you want to include your contact information, that being including your name, your business name, your taxpayer identification number, your application number, your 4506T. Isn't this great? Everybody now knows what a 4506T is. Of course, it's a joint IRS form, but it also can be used by SBA to provide transcripts of your tax returns. I think I've mentioned this before, but you see, many years ago, before kind of they determined this to be happening, I would say it was probably in the late 1990s, is some people would, it's kind of like bank fraud, but they would submit an application to their lender with a tax return that they printed from their TurboTax software program, and then printed a separate one that probably in most cases showed less revenue, they paid less tax that they sent to the IRS. Big no. So because of that, 20 years ago or so, they started saying, okay, well, we'll just go to the IRS and we'll see what you submit with them. And that is the history of the SBA/IRS form number 4506-T. Okay. So I just noticed something here is I think my email could be wrong here on this slide, which is my third typo today, meaning I should be disqualified and be kicked off the air right now. So I will fix that, but if you go to the chat, there is the proper reconsiderations. It looks like there's just too many words in there, so letters. So do look at that in the chat and a lot of our other resources that our producer Maureen has put in there today. And again, while we're talking about the chat, you can go into the Q&A box and put any questions that we will attempt to answer at the conclusion of this. So you'll see that for increases and also for the portal, there's a lot of information there. And let's see. Oh, this is nice. And it looks like we have a winner, Susie M. Lake Powell. Now that very well could be the Colorado River as it snakes up and gets backed up at Lake Powell. And it definitely would appear that way. And a little more knowledge here, perhaps this Horseshoe Bend area, which I believe is part of Lake Powell on the Arizona side, near Page, Arizona, as it is in both Arizona and in Utah. So I'm going to give it to everybody on that. If you put the Colorado River, you put Lake Powell, you all win. Okay, so wow, trip visit to the chat box cleared up a lot of things there. And while we're there, let's answer this question before we move on. So I think there was a question, is the $6,000 a loan or a grant? $6,000. That would be a grant. And that is something that is on the screen right now. So that's very timely. So what I believe it is three $2,000 grants. So let's go over that now. And some of our local partners have got together to award $6,000 to 3 local companies. I don't know if that's $2,000 each, or maybe $3,000 to 1, $2,000, $1,000, but there'll be a total of $6,000 in awards. This will be at the event in February, or excuse me, later part of April, the Women's Business Conference here in Bakersfield. And so the forum is held where entrepreneurs can actually pitch their idea or concept. So this is timely because we are right now on the 16th of February. You only have till Friday to get your applications in. And I believe you see the link right there to the power pitch. So you can get your link right there and to actually get your application in. Organizations within the startup or growth stage. So even with entrepreneurs with an idea, so even if you're at the ideation stage, you can actually get into this, but it is for applicants 18 years of age or older. So again, that is going to close on Friday, February 18th. So coming attractions, as I'm going to call this, because we're not there yet, but we're on our way to getting to these other programs that we'll be discussing in the future. So quick update on our coming attractions on the near program. A few weeks back, we talked about the California Dream Fund. I expect to have more information for you probably in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks is starting to roll out, 35 million, again, from the Office of Small Business, the state of California. I think that there's a lot of us in this line of work that doesn't feel that 35 million is going to go a long way. Hopefully we can get as much out in Kern County as we can. And hopefully it'll be like the California Relief Grant that we had talked about earlier. The program that started on December 30th of 2020 with round 1, and then kept getting more money added to it until we ended up with 9 rounds. So hopefully the California Dream Fund is going to carry that same clout and weight and additional funding to really help seed entrepreneurship, not only in Kern County and Inyo and Mono County, but throughout the other 55 counties in California. So the grants will be either $5,000 or $10,000. Again, it's going to go to our underserved communities. And you've heard the definition a couple of times today, and probably about every week of this webinar since time. So again, there'll be probably around 50 providers that are likely to facilitate grants statewide. The SBDC will be one of those. Again, this is going to be for, the requirements are going to be that you complete a training that's required and actually mandated by the state of California through their Office of Small Business Advocate. And actually, it will also include a business plan and technical assistance one-on-one consulting. Now, I don't know how these are going to be distributed, if there's going to be enough funding, but I believe the training is going to be free of charge, assistance on putting together a business plan and technical assistance. This is why we're waiting 2 more weeks to talk about this in much greater detail as everything becomes known. We have talked about this 1.1 billion that's coming to California that's going to help with some of the lending programs by the iBank and also the California Pollution Control Board, their capital access programs. So it's going to improve lending again to in lending and help deploy capital to social and economic developed individuals, and also the very, very small businesses. And it also has a component to it with venture capital that assist underrepresented venture capital managers, entrepreneurs and businesses, and geographic areas that are more underserved. So also we talk a little bit, haven't talked much about Ppp Forgiveness, but if you need any details on that, or if you've gone through the Ppp Forgiveness process and you weren't satisfied with the results, there is an appeals process. And what you could do is you could email us at the SBDC, and we will talk to you more about that appeals process in order to try to get you the full and just amount of your forgiveness for your forgivable PPP loan. We'll be back next week with on February 23rd, number 102. And let's go to the question box. I see a few questions. So let's see what you got up here. Will you do a webinar on CalSavers? Yes, we will have CalSavers. CalSavers is a mandated program that kicks in for a lot of small businesses on July 1. We actually did a CalSavers program before the pandemic when it was first announced back in 2019. That is on our YouTube channel, I believe. It would be around the time frame, it would be before all these 101, pandemic relief webinars. It'll be before that. The one before that was our Opportunity Zone webinar and started up. It'll go back into 2019, probably around the summer month, probably around June of 2019. And we did have Jonathan Herrera from the state talk about CalSavers. So yes, CalSavers is a topic that we will revisit. If you want to see it before now or before we can get it on, then go back and look at actually the recording that I believe is in our YouTube page. Not all of our old webinars are on there, but that should be back June of 2019. And I do not believe the rules have changed. It was a staggered implementation for CalSavers, which is basically a retirement program that the individual can take with them from employer to employer. It doesn't have a significant cost to the employer. There is some record keeping and things like that, but there's no component of a match. And that's a little bit about CalSavers. But yes, we do have plans on bringing somebody from the state on CalSavers. We were waiting until maybe March or April when we get a little bit closer to that June 1 deadline date. The next question is regarding the EIDL and not being substantiated. Receive the targeted, that's great, and supplemental, so happy to hear. So they already know that they lost 50% of my income. What else can I tell them to substantiate? I think it just really has to go into a little bit detail on your pre-pandemic income and your revenues. Now, on the EIDL loan, the key driver there is going to be your gross profit. Gross profit is defined as your revenues minus cost of sales. So what you want to do is you want to look at your revenues minus your cost of sales in 2019 and then again in 2021. And then kind of go in to look at the areas of where, so I think it's just kind of sitting down and getting things on paper and trying to substantiate the loss in sales and the fact the loss of sales have impacted your business. I think it's great that you've got the targeted and supplemental EIDLs, but I don't know if it's probably different parts of SBA that are looking at that. But it does, of course, when targeted and supplemental are also businesses that are in lower income communities. So in those census tracts that are lower income census tracts. So it's really kind of that is what is, I think, is being looked at in those particular cases. But I'll be glad to talk to you about ways that you could substantiate it. What I would pull is potentially by quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4 in 2019, your revenues, your cost of revenues, your gross profit, and then do the same for the 4 quarters of 2021. That would be a great place to start. Okay, well, there's our deep dive where we basically look at all the programs. We usually do this once a month. Apparently it was February 16th this month. So we got a couple new programs that we got on the horizon, some other things. We're back to running late again. It's only a minute late, so I'm going to get out of here. I don't see any other questions. Let me jump into the chat, make sure that nothing popped up in there. Again, that email incorrect on my slide is PD recons, PD, like police department, recons for reconsideration at sba.gov. Thank you for Maureen for correcting me. And I believe that's about it. So Kern Micro Grant, call our office, get you going on that. Any of the other things are coming along the way. What a drought, huh? Okay, that's going to wrap it today. So for our producer, Maureen Busher-Dang, I'm Kelly Bearden. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. We'll see you next Wednesday. Have a great and profitable business week. Bye-bye, everybody.